With all that, it's now my pleasure to introduce our four panelists for this evening. Each of them will take just a few minutes here at the podium to speak more about what they do and then take a seat with the panel, and we'll have a lot of question and answering. Our first speaker is a solar specialist and employee owner at Skyfire Energy. Everyone please welcome Bryce Hayes.
Well, thank you for the introduction. As he mentioned, I'm Bryce Hayes, solar specialist and employee owner of Skyfire Energy here in Calgary. And to be honest, I feel very blessed to be here today because about 5 years ago, to be very honest with you guys, I was actually sitting where you guys are, trying to figure out where a place in the industry I could actually find a place to be and if I could have employment and a career. My journey to Skyfire started at the NAIT Alternative Energy Program, which is a 2-year program that goes through really any renewable technology, not just solar, thermal, wind, hydro, biofuels, everything like that. Since then, I joined Skyfire as an electrical apprentice, building anything from basic residential PV systems to complex commercial and agricultural systems. Since then, I saw fit to move myself into the office as a project manager and a solar specialist, settling in as a solar specialist for the last 6 months. The work I believe that we do is, from a day-to-day, is probably what people don't know is you're educating people on a day-to-day basis, answering questions, letting people know exactly what they're purchasing, why they'd be purchasing it, and making sure that you can be as clear as possible about the investment they would be making, especially with the residential PV program. I think that's everything I got for you guys today, and thank you.
Thanks, Bryce. Next, we have a project and sales coordinator with KCP Energy. Please welcome Calvin Ng.
Well, first of all, thank you everyone for taking time to be here tonight. I'm actually super humbled to be here. Of all the panelists tonight, I am actually the one that will be learning the most. And I hope you guys will have a lot of takeaway as well. To relate to a lot of you, I've just graduated. I bet from my charming looks, I do look the youngest amongst all four of these gentlemen. That is because I actually just graduated last year. And I am extremely, extremely grateful for the opportunity I've been given in the solar industry. How I got to the position I am in today is just me seeking out opportunities like these, going to conferences that relates to the solar industry as well as other renewable and alternative energy industries, and talking to people. So what you guys are doing here and the questions you guys have for us tonight is more than welcome. I was hired on to KCP at the beginning of January this year. As a sales and project coordinator, I support the residential sales staffs with any of the necessary vetting process, as well as any other information that they require to move from a lead to an opportunity. And currently, I am helping the commercial sales staff with project planning and to developing a way to actually target our consumers who are looking for solar on a larger business level. That's all I have for today, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Calvin. Our third speaker is a sales specialist in renewable energy with Gillivan Green Tech. Gillivan Green Tech is, as you'll recall, our sponsor for tonight, and a renewable equipment supplier with offices here in Calgary. Please give a warm welcome to Jeff Renault.
Hello, everyone. Like the first presenter, I'm very happy to be here. I feel like it's an absolute privilege. My journey started about 10 years ago, well before even being educated or getting into the industry. I was raised in Sarnia, Ontario. If you don't know, that's a chemical processing town, and known for beautiful cityscapes if you ever look up the town. But I had the opportunity to go to school and become a chemical process engineer, pretty much with a well-paying job straight out of school, or take a substantial risk and get into the renewable energy industry, which was just starting. During that time, actually, just outside of Sarnia, Ontario, Canada's largest ground mount system was being installed, an 80 megawatt farm. And I said, you know what, this is actually absolutely something I'd love to be a part of. So I directly went to Lambton College and took their Alternative Energy Engineering Technologist program. And out of that program, I ended up working for a company called Schluter, who is a mounting system manufacturer, and I transitioned there to an inverter manufacturer called Fronius. So I've always been on the supply side, and I've always wanted to be able to offer complete systems with all the knowledge I learned over the last 10 years. So I joined Gullivan Green Tech initially as a sales representation, and now I manage a PC here in Calgary, Alberta, and I'm very happy to be out here and at this event. So thank you very much for your ear.
Thanks, Jeff. And finally, we have someone with a little bit of a different perspective, quite a broad perspective of the industry, who's done analysis and that sort of stuff on the renewable world, a project manager at Solus Energy Consulting. One more warm welcome, please, for Keith Knudsen.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess it's beauty before age. I feel like I'm the grandfather of the bunch here. I have 12 years experience, so I was worried. I thought maybe you might beat me, but 12 years experience. So I graduated from the University of Calgary with a Master's of Science in Mechanical Engineering with a specialization in Environmental Engineering. So I've kind of always had an interest in doing something that was more sustainable related for my career. And it's actually kind of a sort of a fluke that I got into the career that I'm in, because I joined a mentorship program when I was at the University of Calgary, and the guy that I was paired up with, I was a student and he was a professional engineer. He was on the board of a company that was just starting to do some greenfield wind power development work, and lo and behold, next thing you know, I'm kind of working as a junior engineer. So for that renewables company, and it's just kind of amazing how you can put yourself out there, like situations like this, or with a mentorship program, and end up with a career in renewables. So I've been in renewables for about 12 years. I started in wind power, so that's kind of my big, where I spent most of my career is on wind. I started working on solar about 5 years ago. I did a stint at Suncor Energy in their renewable energy group. So I kind of represent the utility scale here, so the big, massive transmission connected projects. So that'll be interesting because I've got a bit of a different perspective, I guess, on that side of the industry. So I've been working for Solus for actually only 3 months. So before that, I was always on the project developer side for renewable energy projects, greenfield siting and building projects up through construction and into operation. And so now I'm on the consultant side, which is a very different change of pace. But we've actually done some work for CISA, actually, and I'm going to push that work tonight a lot. It's a free report that we did for them on solar value chain opportunities in Alberta, including employment opportunities. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. Look forward to the questions and conversations. Thank you.
Hello. I'm moving to the question answer or asking microphone. This is where you will come to ask your questions, but I'm going to start out with a few questions that we know our members ask of people in the industry when they're trying to find out about careers and career development. Hopefully we'll set a baseline for some of the information we'll be talking about today, and then we'll go until maybe close to 8 o'clock, maybe a little bit earlier, whenever it seems appropriate. Take a little bit of a break, and then there's a chance to line up here and ask questions from the audience for these guys. Thank you all for being here. It's very much appreciated. Some of these questions you've already answered pieces of them, but I hope you'll take the time to go in depth a little bit. Just to start out, could you give us a sense from your perspective what a day in the life of someone working in the solar industry goes like? And
so is this one question for one individual?
Because we all
have a very different perspective of
what
one day looks like.
I think for most of these questions, it's for each of you. Now, some of you might pass, but I think this one in particular, I'd like to really go down the line, because I think people are interested in what your lives are like, and maybe even what your former lives were like in renewables.
Absolutely. Which end should we start at? You want to start?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Sure. To answer your question, to start with my former life within the industry, there really wasn't much. I guess to elaborate on how I got into the industry I am in today, is I actually graduated from the University of Calgary as well, but I was part of the Haskins School of Business, and I was in the energy management program, which no longer exists. That and along with the land management program, both got merged into a new program for the new energy that is evolving today to kind of service and kind of teach students on how to kind of be more equipped for the industry that is constantly evolving. But the interesting thing was that due to the fact that the energy management course was mainly focused on petrochemicals and oil and gas, so I actually took the initiative to pilot a sustainability course certificate with my professor. And one thing led to another. I started seeing more individuals that is in the solar, wind, and alternative energy space, and hence my 2 months employment so far. Hopefully it'll last a lot longer than that. But a day in the life for me so far is very, very different on a day-to-day basis because of the size of the company as well as the challenges we take on every day. So for my task as sales and project coordinator, I have to help multiple team members that is working on multiple things. So the most common thing that I'll be working on when I first go into the office and I'll turn on my computer is obviously go through the emails that I received from yesterday or the day before I missed, and that means to vet any new leads, to answer any questions that they have, or even from suppliers or people that want to work with us. So new partnership opportunities. And then from there on, it will really change from who needs me the most that day. So it could be from my commercial sales people who, from the person that is Lee, who needs a Excel sheet based on all of the different rates in different territories in Alberta. So ATCO, EPCOR, and every other location in Alberta, he needs the rate and understanding of all of them. So I'm going to be doing that. If it's with Valerie, which is a residential sales, she might be contacting and having site visits pretty soon, and she needs information that is gathered for her on other things. So my day-to-day is very different in comparison to, I'm sure, these gentlemen here, and it's constantly changing. So I can't really say that I have a solid plan on what's going to happen. Every week has been a learning opportunity so far. So that's the best answer I can give at the moment.
That's a good answer. Yeah, well, we'll see. Hey, so a day in the life in solar, we may, and you will probably hear the term tonight at some point, called the solar coaster. There is never a day that's actually truly the same, and as we all probably have a bit of a different path, an evolving path to even where we are today, so be prepared to take a few different channels and explore a few different things to get to your final or ever evolving destination within the solar industry. We are quite behind in general, quite frankly, globally, in the solar market. So this is something that is going to stay and continue to grow and in different ways and in different markets. To go back to the initial question, though, we are looking at what is the daily life of an individual in the solar industry from unique perspectives. So I'll go back to maybe my Schletter days doing custom mounting systems. We did a lot of information collection, reviewing, understanding. I had a huge foundation of understanding building profiles, envelopes, and how building construction really works, because you need to understand how you're mounting to it and what substructures you're mounting through to make sure that you have something adequately anchored. So through those times, through those 5 years, I've seen an incredible amount of different types of projects. Some of them are quite unique that take a lot of time. Some of them took well over a year worth of planning before they were put into implication or into use, and then we would actually manufacture those systems, and we were just a manufacturer at that time. Shifting over to the inverter world, it was much more of a direct sales role. I worked a lot actually with the distribution partners for Fronius Canada, and it was actually a lot of answering of how these inverters work, why are they so good in their own perspective, And in short, they're well designed for Canadian markets with a negative 40-degree rated system, and they're actually very much geared towards a end user product, as in that they're field serviceable quite easily. So this was a different sort of perspective where I was dealing with a different set of installers and a completely different product line going from mechanical to electrical. So that was another huge learning curve for me. And then lastly, stepping into the sales role, at least initially in Ontario with Gullivan Green Tech, this was where I really wanted to be, to hit the stride of selling complete systems. While those two products are quite well-known names, I was just really excited to actually supply full systems and design full systems with the experience that I had developed over the last several years prior to that. Now moving out here and working with a group of very dedicated and eager individuals that want to see the solar market grow, see Gullivan Green Tech grow. It is quite refreshing to have that support and the team dedication. So more of a team lead at this point, and still doing, quite frankly, a lot of those other roles, but there is no same day. It can be from a busy day packing orders to just doing quotes and working again with employees to make sure that we're all doing a great job and making sure that the solar contractors are getting what they need, which fundamentally goes to companies like Skyfire that do excellent quality installs. So that's a tidbit of a daily life. It's always ever evolving, and good luck.
I kind of had, so I was a developer before last year. So maybe I'll talk about a day in the life of what it's like to be a developer in renewables. A lot of the work that I had done was public consultation and regulatory. So if you want people to yell at you, then renewables is the place to be, because it's amazing the number of people that are really angry at you when you go to open houses. But I mean, I guess that's kind of the thing with everything. But no, I mean, actually, I learned a lot. I kid, but I learned a lot about public consultation and dealing with people. And it's like if you're a landowner out in the field. This kind of stuff is really near and dear to your heart because you moved out to the field or you moved out into the open landscape of rural Alberta for a reason. You want to be there because you love the view of rolling hills and trees, and then all of a sudden a big solar farm comes in or a wind farm comes in, and that's a big industrial facility that all of a sudden is in your community. So. My thought was always, we know we're not going to get unanimous support for these projects out in those communities, but we try and definitely develop the best projects that we can, taking into consideration where people live and their opinions, but also knowing that we believe in renewable energy, and these are the types of projects that we see as the future. So. Anyway, I just got sidetracked, but I did a lot of work on regulatory and public consultation. When I first started, I was doing a lot of data analysis. So for both wind and solar, there's a big component for project siting for utility scale projects where you actually have to sort of figure out, how much energy am I going to be able to produce from this project. So on the wind side, we do, data analysis on wind speed, and on the solar side, we look at solar irradiance. And on the developer side, that's really important because, you want to have a good site because the more wind or solar you have, the more money that you're going to make, right? So there's a lot of emphasis placed on siting for solar and for wind on me when I was a more junior person. Now that I'm a consultant, I am a project manager, which means I deal with budgets and timesheets, which isn't really very glorious, but it's all part of the process. But being on the consultant side is really great because, a day in the life of a consultant just really depends on what your clients want. So we've done some really great work for project developers. So a lot of the material that I'm familiar with in terms of, developing solar sites for utility scale grid connection. But we also get some really great opportunities to work with groups such as CISA, who want to do some more in-depth market analysis in terms of opportunities in Alberta, or just assessment of where solar is going to be going. So that's really great because then there's a lot of research and report writing and sort of delving into the nitty-gritties of solar specifically, and figuring out where solar is going in Alberta. So yeah, I think that sort of wraps up kind of all the stuff that I do. Yeah.
Yeah, as all of these gentlemen have said, there is no same day in the solar industry. It's a constantly evolving day. Every day is going to be a new challenge. And as the roles I've been in have changed over the last few years, my day-to-day has changed drastically, from showing up in my Carhartts and my tool belts, getting ready to jump in the van and get on a roof, set up your safety, and start building some beautiful PV arrays on either commercial buildings, barns, your everyday home. The electricians in the field, I believe, are very, at least the ones I know, are extremely satisfied at the end of the day, because at the end of every 2 days, roughly, they're completing a project. They're now generating power on someone's house. They're giving someone the ability to generate their own power, which is something you can't do in a everyday situation, except for in renewables, I believe. As a solar specialist, my day is very different, except for the start of the day. Is always seeing what the new challenge is going to be in the emails, and seeing what the new design or the new engineering problem that you're going to have to solve throughout the day, or maybe push to tomorrow. Coffee, yeah, the coffee maker starts first, though. Coffee, yeah, I would agree on that. Coffee starts first and is always there, because you're going to need it. But you're always going to be finding every single PV project is very unique and very different, and possesses its own unique challenges, and as well the clientele change, and their needs, and what they actually need for their system, and the products that fit their system change depending on the site to site. And so, most of my day is meeting with clients and walking them through the process, and what products we can actually use to meet their needs and fulfill what they actually want to do on their roof, or with their farm, or with their commercial building. And from a project manager side, I would agree it is a lot of schedules and budgets, and making sure that your crews are ready to go, and that they have a plan, and they have the best plan possible, so that they can be successful, which goes back to the solar specialist, that they need to be able to create that plan and go to site, find those details, get into the panel, find out exactly what we're sending electricians to do, instead of wait there and figure it out when they get there. Preparing our electricians for their day-to-day is something I take a lot of pride in, and being able to give them the best chance of success on every project to come under budget and under time is the biggest part of my day-to-day, most likely. And I think that's the day-to-day in solar. It's always evolving.
Thanks, guys. That was excellent. You've covered a little bit about your experience of getting into and through, and for many of you, a number of different areas in the renewable industry. So this is really interesting. Can each of you share, if you can think of one, I don't know, maybe this might be unfair to you, Calvin, but a lesson that you've learned through your work that significantly impacted your work in the renewable industry, or something that you would go back and do differently if you could?
Yeah, I think I'll pass on this, probably because I don't have enough experience to really answer this question.
No regrets.
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat the exact question?
Sure. Is there a lesson you can share that you've learned in your work that's had a big impact on the work after that? Either that or something that you wish you'd done differently if you could have gone back.
I'll keep my answer pretty broad on this one. I think it comes down to, in this industry, that quality work and reputation are far beyond anything. The guys who cut corners are the guys who are not going to last. So this is why probably single biggest contribution to that question is that you need to take a pride in work and do well and take this quite seriously. It's not a sort of a get-rich-quick scheme, and it's also certainly not a way to rip off the average homeowner or building owner. So if you do get into this industry, take pride, do good work.
So when I first started working back in 2008, how many years did I say I had? Doesn't add up. 12? Okay, well, I can't do math at all. I had the first wind project that we worked on. I regret not going to SAIT and staying there for months. I know we're here to talk about solar, but solar and wind utility scale, they're very similar. Just the lessons that you learn and the things you learn when you construct utility scale projects by being on the ground and actually seeing what goes into putting steel into the ground and mounting the solar panels, or erecting the turbines. I think that's sort of something that I would change if I had my time back. I would have gone and spent more time in the field actually learning from the folks who have the hands-on. I think there's like some sort of, I guess, engineers are sort of known to be like, no, we're hands off, and maybe I fed into that, but I think I really could have learned a lot more from going in there and actually like turning some wrenches. So that's one thing, getting in to do a holistic learning of these projects is getting in. And if you can get there and put your hands on these things, I think that would be really beneficial. That would have been really beneficial for me.
Okay. One lesson I've learned, I can go back to probably the first day when I sat down at school at NAIT in the Alternative Energy program. And first lesson I learned is I had my program chair tell me to the whole entire class, there's most likely at this point, this was several years ago, not going to be an employment opportunity for you by the time you graduate. And at that point, probably half of the class quit. At that point, when you're being told you just jumped into a university or college program that you're probably not going to have employment afterwards because there's no market, that definitely, I think, took away a lot of very good and qualified people from the industry. And if I could go back and do it again, I would tell them most likely that just wait a few years and finish your program. In 2 years, you'll see what you're seeing now is that the solar industry in Alberta is by far stronger than it's ever been. And the opportunities are, they're bountiful at the moment, at least in the employment sector for individuals. And yeah, I would agree with you that getting into the field and getting the hands-on experience was definitely extremely important for my understanding of the systems. So if I could do another thing again, is I probably would have finished my apprenticeship and continued to get a deeper understanding of the electrical systems and a deeper understanding of the nuts and bolts of the system. And it's a lot of fun just to get your hands dirty and build these systems sometime. Thank you.
Bryce, you created a nice segue for this next question. I'm just wondering if you guys could each give us your perspective of the solar industry, or the renewable industry more broadly, but focusing on solar if possible, and where you envision it being in, say, 5 years. You can focus on Alberta, or if you want to go with a national or even international perspective, that's fine. We're just curious, your inside view of the industry.
Yeah, okay. Must be. I'll speak to the utility scale. I actually really don't know too much about microgen. It's a really great time to be in renewables. I don't know if you saw recently, but there was a contract award for 94 megawatts of solar in Alberta, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was for 4.8 cents a kilowatt hour, I believe. And I don't know if you looked at your bill last month, but I'm on the floating rate, and my bill was 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's amazing, it's full on like 2 cents cheaper than what I'm paying for my electricity at the moment. So it's a great time for renewables. We're seeing prices fall for utility scale solar and wind substantially, and solar is catching up. In the past, whenever we've participated in technology agnostic competitions between wind and solar, wind would always win. But solar is really catching up, and solar has a really great thing, which is that the time value when it delivers energy is so much better than wind, especially in Alberta. Because in Alberta, wind blows at nighttime and in the wintertime, and solar generates during the day, and that's when people are using electricity. So like solar, just the value of electricity that solar generates and delivers to the grid is far superior than wind. And so couple that with the fact that we see contracts coming in at 4.8 cents. That's just incredible. It's an incredible story for solar. It's an incredible story for solar in Canada. You look at other jurisdictions in Canada, and they've paid so much for their solar. And it kind of goes to show in Alberta, we've always, like, Alberta has a different type of market for electricity, and we're innovators here, and because of that, we've seen the price of solar come down in these contracts so much. So it's really exciting for solar. The elephant in the room is that there's an election, coming up in a couple months, and we're not sure what that's going to mean. So we'll see. But I think I've done a little bit of work on the thermal side, on gas, natural gas power generation, and solar is really competing with that. And when you think about natural gas, you've got a fuel cost there, and sure, right now. Natural gas is pretty cheap. What is it, like $3 a gigajoule or something like that? But it wasn't so long ago, back in the 2000s, that natural gas was like $12 or $13 a gigajoule. And so you take your most efficient gas turbine, and your fuel costs alone are like 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's like double of what solar is, and solar has no fuel cost. So that's just the fuel cost for natural gas. And on top of it, you have to pay off your capital and your O&M, right? So it's a really exciting time for utility scale solar in Alberta. And I think in 5 years from now, I think we're going to see, even if we get a change in government and if we don't get any long-term contracts for renewable energy, I think the structure in Alberta will still enable renewables, particularly solar, because of the time value when it's delivered. It'll enable growth in that industry still. So there you go.
Do you mind repeating the question, actually?
Sorry, I talked too long.
Yeah. No, well, Keith really covered it very well. But I'd appreciate your perspective, though, just your inside view of the state of the industry, the solar industry in particular, in Alberta, in Canada, and where you see it heading, like where you see it in 5 years as opposed to now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you said, the solar industry has really never been stronger, and is growing, and is getting stronger. As new technologies come out and prices drop, with policies that are at risk with upcoming elections. But I do feel like it's reaching a point where it might be able to stand alone without any policy. With this upcoming election, it might not be, the industry itself might not be at as much risk as most people would anticipate, with the 35% of the system cost being provided by the government at the moment for the majority of residential systems. The PV industry itself is extremely strong and is growing daily. Companies are expanding, companies are starting still, even with this upcoming election. So there's definitely still room in the industry for more companies. And the state of the industry in 5 years, I would see a lot more storage coming in the next 5 years. A lot more industrial scale battery systems coming in to partner and kind of bridge that gap between peak usage in the mornings and the evenings and when solar's producing, which is during the day. So utility scale storage would really, I believe, bridge that gap between when people are using electricity and when it's being produced, particularly for solar.
So I wanted to take maybe a slightly different approach, because these guys covered that pretty well. I wanted to talk maybe a little about the exposure solar has onto the general public, and a little bit about technologies that are coming to our market. So first is, who doesn't get excited when you drive down the street and see a solar system? I do, every time, and it's been 10 years and it doesn't get old, at least so far. Maybe once every house has it and it's all a standard, there you go. But you can look over and go, hey, that guy's producing the power technically even for his neighbors if he's exporting to the grid as well, so anything extra. So that's what I've seen across Canada is just the acceptance in general. I've heard very weird and wild things from partners not wanting something because it might make the look roof, to neighbors having concerns of how something may or may not look or how it will affect or how the glare shines off. Really weird concepts that people all get really hung up on. It's like, this is glass. There's a lot of metal roofs out there that reflect. We all have windows. This is just really a different glass product that we like to put on our roof, and it actually protects your roof in a big way. So there's a lot of added value there. Not only that, it actually protects your shingles and creates a cooler attic for you during the summer. So those are just some of those exposure things the general public gets to see. And as you see more solar, the more desire general public actually has for it, and it becomes a concept of keeping up with the Joneses. Aside from that, though, we do have some technology changes with the idea of solar storage coming in. EV is a huge market that's developing globally, and the demand of charging up a full battery, even overnight, even on a low charge, that is a substantial charge. So people are already looking at solar to offset their annual consumption, but what happens when you practically double that consumption, and the grid also has its own issues actually supplying maybe a whole neighborhood, all with EV chargers. And this is kind of where community-based or even right there locally based in the home will have their own battery storage. And there's even the concept of being able to satisfy loads with your car. And a lot of utilities all over Canada are very eager to see how you can either use the EV battery, the home energy storage, and having on-demand response to actually create it. There's many instances in Ontario where they're putting in utility-scale storage to shave peak demands, as well as creating actually a more stable grid because the battery technology is actually more stable than just straight up generation. So as we look at these, we're going to see the increase of EVs increasing the energy consumption for the average homeowner and business owner from a straight consumption standpoint on there. It's just joules either way you put it, but this will come from the sun, stored in a battery, and then reutilized at a time that's actually beneficial instead of being lost and burned as heat. So that's kind of my general opinion, seeing across Canada globally. Like I said before, we're quite far behind, so we have a long way to come here in Canada, and this is where all these technologies are coming together, almost independent of policy and pricing. We're seeing these adoptions happen here globally. Just check out some other markets, and China and the US are clearly right there. So that's my 2 cents on maybe where the market might be in the next 5, 10, 15, 50 years. We're going to see our world rapidly change at some point. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, all my colleagues here have very optimistic viewpoints, and I mean, I do as well, and I'm sure a lot of you have optimistic viewpoints for alternative energy, especially for solar for this country. And since they touch on a lot of the market diversification on the products and what is going to come about in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I kind of want to touch on just the evidence of it, and that starts with our college and university education. From the very beginning of this session, we saw Judy kind of mentioning the courses that will be offered at SAIT. I mean, that's huge. The fact that I was mentioning earlier that the current program that I study from and the petroleum land management at U of C being gone and having to reform into a new program means that the institutions are recognizing that there is a shift in our energy portfolio in this country, and that it is a drastic shift that requires the attention from all aspects, from a multidisciplinary study and viewpoint, from business, from engineering, and from all sources of understanding. So there is a demand. We recognize that there is going to be a change that's happening very soon, so that the institutions are making a difference and making their programs more accurate so they can foster the students for tomorrow, so that when the changes come, we have the right people to do the work, so that we won't be cutting corners, so that we can actually do the work that is appropriate and needed for the country to grow. So the gentleman, what they spoke about, absolutely correct, and there is evidence to back that from institutions within Alberta and across Canada to prove that. So that's my opinion on the future industry of solar.
Awesome. You guys are an inspiration. You know, like it's really great to hear so much optimism from inside, because you see a variety of clients, right, and what they're facing, and so it's very encouraging. Okay, so a nitty-gritty question for each of you and your organizations, and if you want to reflect on other organizations you work with, that's okay too. But everyone's interested. Are you hiring? Is your firm hiring, or do you know firms that are hiring? And if so, and when I say hiring, like planning on bringing someone in, say, in the next 12 months, in the coming year, bringing in additional person or people, and what characteristics and qualifications are you looking for?
So Gullivan Green Tech has been growing here steadily across Canada. We have one distribution hub in London, Ontario. We have one here in Calgary, Alberta, and we actually just opened up our third PC in Nova Scotia. So if you want to move out there, we definitely have a few positions. We are continually evolving and growing. So we're always open for resumes, anything from warehouse into inside sales and technical design. Of course, based on probably where you guys are sitting, there is a bit of a growth period already there, and we can talk a little bit about other avenues of getting into the industry. But we're not necessarily hiring immediately, but we do have positions that are continually popping up across Canada, quite frankly. So. The short answer is yes in the future, and it's part of the organic growth of distribution across Canada.
Sure. Actually, KCP Energy just has posting up for more installers. We're actually trying to expand our installation team, and our master electrician is actually currently going through the interview process with some applicants. And I can't speak with too much clarity because my boss is in the room right now. But I am very certain that within 12 months' time that our company is looking to bring on board summer students and also other applicants that is interested into learning from the solar industry and these professionals. I see him nodding, so that's a good sign. I'm saying the right things.
So as a consultant, we're definitely more susceptible to the whims of different policies and sort of external drivers for renewable energy technology. So currently we aren't, because I think we're all on the utilities scale side, sort of waiting on bated breath to see what happens in a couple months. That doesn't mean that all of our projects are going to magically just evaporate, because like I was saying before, renewable energy is really becoming quite competitive with other technologies. But yeah, I would say, if renewable energy still keeps growing in Alberta, which, we hope it will be, we'd be looking for people. We'd most likely be hiring people into analyst roles. And so our analysts will do a lot of technical work. So we do like glare studies, you're mentioning for residential, but we do glare studies for utility scale, energy assessment, and we do a lot of public consultation. So, people who have more softer skills, so, communicating, technical writing, engaging with, people that may not be necessarily happy about the project we're proposing. So people have really good communication skills. That's sort of who we would be looking for in the next 12 months or so.
Yeah, I actually just checked our website today, and we have postings for 7 jobs currently in Edmonton, Regina, our Penticton office, and our Calgary office. So we are currently hiring at the moment for some people to almost be starting, in the next month. And then as well as, things change, obviously, with the election in a few months here, we might slow down our hiring, but for the next 12 months. But if things stay the course, we'd most likely be continuing to hire and ramp up both our installation crews, our project management side. We are currently needing support in the drafting area, as well as solar specialists, master electricians, journeyman electricians, apprentice electricians just looking to start, as well as hiring some summer students to just start and learn. So yeah, short answer, yes. Long answer, also yes.
Excellent, thank you. More encouragement there. So following that, do you have any advice you'd offer to someone who is trying to break into the solar industry? I understand that, it depends on the individual, right? Their background and that sort of thing. But do you have any general advice or specific advice in particular areas where you just mentioned the positions are open?
So I think one of the first things is maybe do a little bit of soul searching and finding out what kind of roles you actually really want to be in. As we mentioned, there's many different sort of job roles and different ways you can get into the industry, but different functions that we can actually all perform. So it really kind of depends on your personality. Are you more of an engineer, more of sales, for example? And there's a lot of sort of personality tests that you can actually take out there just to maybe dig a little deeper and find that. And the reason why I say that is you're probably going to then invest into some education and some hardcore efforts into actually getting into this industry if that's what you desire. So making sure you kind of have a good target of where you want to be. But the other side is I think most of us kind of came into the industry with a bit of interest, but also then evolved and developed our interest along the way as well. So there's kind of a double-edged sword there with both my comments. One is just jump in with both feet if you can and learn and grow as fast as you can. And the other side is, find out where you would like to be, especially if you're looking for sort of a higher paying salary type of an employment. Like most entrepreneurial type of advice that I've seen out there, it's volunteering groups. I'm a part of the ELSE group, the Emerging Leaders in the Solar Industry, and we are actually having a couple open positions just if you are looking, so we can talk about that later, but volunteering either with installation groups, extra hands, getting on the roof, getting that first-hand experience, even if you're not getting maybe paid too much for doing it. Experience is obviously incredibly valuable, so I think that's how I'll answer that one.
As a recent hire into this industry and into my company, I guess I should offer a little bit of how I broke into the industry. And it was from university in my final year, understanding that the opportunity isn't there unless I go out there and I find it. It is there. It's constantly changing. It's constantly moving. But if you don't take the initiative to go out there to talk to people, ask the questions, and be genuinely curious, I think in all the conversations I have had with professionals that are sitting right next to me today, that I'm honored to be calling myself a colleague to them, is because I was genuinely interested into how this industry is developing. Funny thing is, how I got into the job I am currently working it started with that question. It was an essay competition for the 2018 Canadian Solar Conference. The question was, what do you see the solar industry is heading towards in 2050? Like, it was a one-page essay, and I wrote down my genuine thoughts on where the solar industry is heading. And during that conference, I won the essay contest, and I got the opportunity to go to. And throughout the 2-day conference, I spoke with as many people as I can, not selling myself, being like, oh, I am about to graduate and I could really use a job, but genuinely asking, be like, hey, I know you are in this field, and I'm curious about what you guys are doing. And by doing that, you will have real conversations where you can actually learn and break yourself into the industry and kind of take part into the conversations that's really happening when work is being done. So that's my 2 cents. When's the next one? Solar Canada? Google Solar Canada 2019, I've been getting emails about signing up for it already. The last one that happened was in June. So definitely keep your eyes open. It's a great opportunity. It's in May. Oh, okay. Well, my friend here knows more about it than I do. I have not been keeping my eyes open enough, but it's in May. So would you like to speak more on it?
Oh, no, I was just saying that would be the next Solar Canada event that's in the market here, and it's in Calgary this year, and it's in May. So maybe we'll see you there.
I don't want to say it. This is so cliche, but patience. I know you don't want to hear that, but on the utility side, renewable energy it's the way forward, and Calgary is an amazing city because we've got so many power companies here, and we've got so many oil and gas companies here who are interested in offsetting their greenhouse gas emissions or doing something more sustainable. Like Suncor has a renewable energy group. TransCanada owns renewable energy assets. So if you're interested on the utility scale side, if you can't get in right away on a renewable energy group, if you can get into one of these companies and you're interested in it, work your way in and try and get the skills by having mentors within the company, or setting up coffees with people in the company, and working your way into the renewable energy group or into the sustainability group. Every company has a sustainability group these days, and so like you said, depending on your skill set, if you're a communicator, if you're a technical person, all these opportunities exist in these big utility companies. Maybe not necessarily in renewable energy, but it's a way in. So.
Yeah, the best advice I could say is probably figure out what you're passionate about and jump straight into it and try to immerse yourself into how you could actually, at least get into the door and get a handshake with someone who might be able to get you a position, or at least a conversation would be a great place to start. As well as education. If you know what you're passionate about, education is always extremely valuable, especially in these very high trained and very qualified positions, I would say, across the industry. As well, I kind of feel like I kind of fell into my position, but absolutely probably the best way to do it is to, I believe they advertise on the CISA websites for positions, and you can just go right to their jobs, and it's going to give you every posting for all the companies that are advertising on the CISA website, as well as a list of solar providers in the country, or in the province at least, and just go to their websites. They might not be advertising on the CISA website, but they're going to be advertising on their own. So just doing a little bit of research into what drives you from a day-to-day, and what's going to be able to get you going for a career, and then finding the right company and doing your best to start a conversation with these people who have been in the industry for so long. I actually ended up with Skyfire as an intern, finishing up my alternative energy program. So I was an intern designing an O&M program for them for utility scale PV projects, and as soon as they offered me a position as an electrician, I had no electrical background, and jumped straight into it without even thinking, because at one point or another I knew it would lead me towards what I was actually going to be wanting to do, and give me a deeper understanding of the systems and what I'd be actually selling people, and what the challenges of these people actually building them go through. So yeah, find what you're passionate about and go for it.
Outstanding. Thank you very much.
Despite the massive American market in the solar industry, we often just have cheaper panel and racking costs. It comes down to having, I think, also a non-solidified or non-uniform program across all of Canada for these things. And it is similar in the States. They do have, obviously, the rebate programs that are different per state, but they also have a national program as well. So the short answer is that, yeah, we try and avoid that.
We did a report for CISA on the solar value chain opportunity in Alberta. So it's on their webpage to read, and it goes through basically where we see the value in Alberta for where the jobs could be in Alberta. And one of the things that we found was that on manufacturing of components, not the solar modules themselves, we didn't see that there was we could be really competitive with manufacturing the solar modules, but doing a lot of the racking systems and the inverters and that kind of stuff. There was a lot of established businesses already in Alberta that we thought that they could tackle some of these things. So we saw a lot of the potential growth opportunity in Alberta be on the manufacturing of some of those components that you were mentioning about bringing in from the States. So if Alberta really goes for it and starts manufacturing some of these components, I think we could see some great opportunities for jobs and job growth in Alberta.
I know you have questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, what's the typical payback time for a residential solar project?
So currently, with the current rebates that the province offer, the payback time is between 10 to 12 years. So let's say an average system in Alberta right now is 7 kilowatts, just about. That's 22 panels. With the rebates on top of it, the cost will be around $12,000 total. And then within, between 10 to 12 years, that will be your payback period. Yeah. Good question, though. Yeah.
What's also different, and people don't talk about these, is that most solar systems will actually increase in value over time and pay themselves off even quicker. So these are analyses typically based on current electricity prices, maybe even some growth. But if there are any substantial increases, it substantially impacts the payback period. For example, in remote communities where they put in even off-grid systems that are fairly more expensive than battery-based systems, I've seen remote communities have paybacks as fast as 6 months. So it really depends on what your cost per kilowatt hour is, whether it's 4 cents or $12. That dramatically obviously affects that as well.
Hi, and next, I think it's a logical question after the payback time. Like, what's the lifetime, average lifetime of the solar panel? But
yeah. Well, we'll see what maybe a few different opinions across the board are, but how long do these systems last, I believe was the question. Well, a lot of these products have sort of 10 and 25-year warranties. I've personally even seen panels that have been operating for almost 50 years. The efficiency does tend to climb down, the power output. And if you guys end up looking or Googling up even any module spec sheets, LG makes some great products. In fact, they're leading in the industry with their warranties as well as some of their module degradation, which is the decrease in performance per year. They're still at, I think it's almost about 90% after 25-ish years. And that's, as an industry, that's been sort of climbing, and it used to be like 80%. So we're seeing panels that can last a long time. The aluminum type of products are going to last almost, indefinitely. The biggest one is it's the power electronics. It's your inverters, and typically those can last, between the 10, 15, and it depends if, you have it in a nice protected area where it's not maybe under the constant summer sun or directly out in exposed frigid cold. And more importantly, if there's sort of a dusty site and cobwebs that climb around where they expel the heat off them, those things can all affect the inverter performance and lifetime. But I'll leave it open to see what some other opinions might be.
No, I think you nailed it there with the fact that these products, the majority of these are warranted for 25 years. Almost every decent module is going to come with a 25-year power production warranty, which is saying that it's going to be producing X value. With the LGs is around 90, depending on the module, is going to be around 86 to 90% after 25 years. And we're actually seeing through local data that the modules, specifically here in Western Canada, because we actually have this colder climate, that the module degradation is slower here. So I would expect these systems to last and be performing extremely well, into their 30s and 40s of years, which is something with a payback of 10 years, 10 to 12 years for a typical system. It's a fairly sound investment.
Hi. So away from the electrical application of the solar energy, what's the potential of the thermal applications, like parabolic troughs and using the solar energy for heating applications in the province and in the country? Thank you.
So sorry, the question was, what is the potential for using solar thermal or solar electric for heating? What was the I couldn't quite hear you.
No, the potential of using the solar energy for thermal applications, for heating applications, not for electrical generation.
Using PV for heating?
No, not using PV at all.
Well, solar thermal, so the first thing is solar collectors themselves are like 98% efficient. You're taking direct thermal heat and then collecting it into glycol and putting it into the home. So the applications of using solar thermal collectors is very efficient, and there's many applications that you can apply that to.
Is it something common in Alberta or in Canada to use?
Actually, a few years ago, there used to be quite a few incentives for solar thermal, and they seem to be a lot rarer than PV systems these days, but they did exist, and those products are still widely available if you're interested. The problem there is that most people already have an electric or a gas heater in their house to heat their water and use on those applications, for example, at least on the residential side. So. There are definitely opportunities to use solar thermal. And as we mentioned, we have some of the best sun in all of Canada.
I'm keeping my sound man busy. I'll just add to that we do have on the solar providers directory on the CISA website, there are, I think, about a half a dozen providers that list as doing solar thermal work. And I think that's mostly like solar hot water heat for water use.
Hello. Why do you think the electricity network isn't prepared to receive surplus energy from households? For example, if all the households would have photovoltaic panels, electricity network wouldn't be prepared for this.
So this kind of comes to maybe one of my previous comments that there's actually a lot of wasted power here currently, just in general, right? Any power that's not actually consumed has to be burned off as heat in general. So any extra power produced by PV could be and should be put into battery storage for future use. And any extra PV power that actually gets exported to the grid actually kindly goes to your neighbors for consumption. So that's kind of what actually happens when you export. And I think we all, in general, want to watch our efficiencies and collect that sort of wasted generated PV power, even though the fuel is effectively free from solar.
Hi, so this question is kind of related to the same subject, grid, solar, etc. So we all know, obviously, renewables are intermittent, so we have to solve the problem with batteries and all this stuff. But a big part of it is obviously smart grids, where it's all connected and it's all kind of compensates for one another and all that. Do you guys see in solar industry, from utilities side, interest in starting to at least research and plan implementation of those, or that's still some ways away?
100% yes. The more progressive utility companies are absolutely looking at that and testing the products, seeing the grid responses, what kind of controls they can put into them, so that they're aware that when they're actually in the homes that they know what kind of controls or how they could control your battery. This is now maybe a touchy subject because a lot of people want to produce their own power and have that grid independence, but we also know that just generally across Canada we have a stable grid, and we really, why would we throw that away? But on the other hand, the utilities are very interested on both the sort of localized storage on residential, but absolutely on commercial as well. Yes.
Thanks.
Here.
Thanks. And I would say on the grid scale, it definitely is an interest, and you mentioned renewables are intermittent. We in our business we like to call them variable because it doesn't sound as negative as intermittent. So you like to call it a variable resource. Currently in Alberta, we've got a plan of 30% by 2030. 30, could you imagine? And that was set because the grid can handle it as is. Our grid is not as flexible as say British Columbia or Quebec or Manitoba, where you have a lot of hydro, and hydro is the easiest thing to kind of turn on and off. We don't really have a lot of that. We got 900 megawatts or so, but we do have a lot of gas, and gas is pretty flexible too. So there's been lots of studies by the system operator to say by 2030 we can manage 30% renewables on the system without having to worry about ramping products or storage products or that kind of thing. But I think long term, like in Alberta, we were talking about this before, but there's no incentive to use electricity during non-peak times in Alberta, right? So when we get home from work, we flip on our stove and we start doing laundry, that kind of thing. But in Ontario and other jurisdictions, you have time of use pricing, and I think that's one thing that I think is of interest for the province, because people don't change their behaviors unless it impacts their pocketbook, I find, So as soon as you're paying more for your dishwasher at peak time, you're going to wait until afterwards. And I had nothing to do with your question, but I just thought it was interesting.
Okay, I got a couple of comments. One, I think we never talked about the low-hanging fruit, and you see it all over the place now, that the cost to get electricity over to that crosswalk or to that blinking light in the middle of a meridian and some of those places is astronomical. So that's low-hanging fruit for solar, but we didn't talk about that a lot. But the other thing is, you have to have a business case for, we talked this net zero, right? I'm wondering which utility is going to come up, bring power to my house and say, net zero, I'm just doing it because we're a good guy, right? What do you see the market for them going? Because if they have to be there for demand, they definitely need to have a business case and a profit.
Is that the utility guy has to answer that? It's really, you're right. There's sort of like two sides of it, and I would say 10 years ago we had Bullfrog Power and we had Greenbacks, right? And so all of a sudden people were paying like 3 or 4 times their electricity just to have that warm and fuzzy that they're doing something good for the environment. And I think that's really changing, because on one hand, renewables are so much more competitive now that you don't have to pay 3 or 4 times more just to have that warm fuzzy. So I think these utilities that are coming in some cases, and not in Alberta, but in some cases, utilities are legislated to have a certain mix of renewables in their generation portfolio, but we don't have that in Alberta. So for them, it is either business case or it's a warm and fuzzy. And I think that warm and fuzzy is becoming less and less common because it is becoming a business case. We're seeing companies enter into long-term contracts for providing renewable energy that generate returns that are acceptable to stakeholders. And that this is why we're seeing a lot more renewables in Canada being built. So I think the business case is there. Right now, renewables are relying on long-term contracts with government entities to meet their return thresholds. And I think in Alberta, that is most likely going to be going away, especially if we get a change of government. But in Alberta, the price of electricity fluctuates every 5 minutes. And if you're generating during that 5 minutes, you get paid that price. And I was talking about the value of solar before and how during the day the value of the electricity that delivers during the day is higher because prices are higher. So I think the business case is more and more there. I don't know, did that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I think it come close. I guess the business case I'm talking about is somebody sitting there and having the backup for the net zero we talk about, right? That means that at the end of the year, I'm not going to pay you guys anything, but I'm going to use you when I need you throughout the year. And so there's got to be some sort of vision as to how to support that.
Yeah.
And I don't, because people aren't going to do it for free unless they're
so you're talking
legislated.
about microgen rooftop stuff, right? Is that
like
if you were
the
a
net
consumer.
zero houses that we have in Calgary and
See, I
Edmonton.
told you it was your question. Everyone thought I was the utility. Yeah.
No. What I'm saying is, why would the utility want to put a service into my place, my net zero house? Why would they want to do that?
I don't know if you've looked at your electricity bill and seen how much of it is actually distribution and transmission charges. Okay. That's why. Okay, so you're 100%. Telling me the net zero isn't net zero? No, they're not.
No. What I'm saying is, on a net zero house, it's only for energy, not for transmission.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the one.
Okay, well that makes sense. I didn't know that.
When you're talking net zero, typically you're talking about the actual consumption and the energy. You're not really talking about the transmission and the distribution and the local access fees and those other 6 parts of your bill.
So I have a question about the as installer. What kind of improvement or evolution do you want to see in the technology that would be nice to have that you don't have right now? new improvement to the PV system?
Well, there's been a lot of improvement in the last few years through module efficiency. Power optimizers have become quite huge, especially from the safety standpoint. The power optimizers are making general string systems extremely safe to work on, that it's almost plug and play. But from an improvement standpoint, I would love to see the duration and the life of an inverter be able to last closer to what a PV system would be reaching, mainly because we're talking 40-year lifespans with most of this equipment, except for the inverter, where we're still stuck around that 12 to 15 years. So if we could figure out a way to make that, more compatible with the long-term investment, instead of having, several thousands of dollars in different portions of the lifespan of the array, I could see that being very beneficial.
It was mentioned, I think the single biggest one right now is module power classes. When I got into the industry, the sort of commonplace one was for the average residential panel was about 180 watts. LG that we have in stock right now, it's at 360 watts in the same frame size. And why is this really important is, sure, there's less mounting systems required, but ideally what that actually means is that a lot of roofs are not perfectly south-facing or have exposure for the amount of panels that they want. So as the power density, and that just means the watts in the same amount of space, increases, it allows you to actually design systems a lot more efficiently and actually offset what your goals are. And I think another one, as we touched on, is the battery technology that's emerging. There's exceptional warranties on the products that have come out here in just in the last couple years that do also pair right in line with the inverter warranties right around that 15-year mark. So now you can have a system that's got your back for 15 solid years and will likely last even longer, at least on that battery technology side. So for me, I think it's the coolest part is just watching these panels climb up and keep going. I haven't actually seen it plateau yet. So we'll see. I mean, I see things in the news about new ways that they can come up with solar panels and ways that to create higher efficiencies. And if they can bring those to market as well, we could see some exceptionally high power class. So it'd be pretty cool if you could power your whole house with a single panel someday. I said it would be cool.
Getting back to this guy's question about design, could you get design for like shingles without having panels like this? Like clay shingles or?
So are you asking if solar shingles are a common product in the industry? Currently, no. They're very much not. Solar panels themselves actually protect your shingles, and ideally the best way you can do is put a metal roof on. Sorry, go ahead. What's your question?
If you got a problem with neighbors don't like it and all that, wouldn't you want to go with that system with?
For the most part, your neighbors can't stop you from doing it, to be honest, just so you know. And personally, I think they look awesome. I think everyone else here would say they look awesome. But solar shingles are something that's a bit of a big push, and you've probably seen Tesla talk about them, and this might be why you're asking. It's a matter of opinion, and we'll see where the market goes, but combining a roof product with an electrical product is actually quite dangerous. There's claims that it's cheapest to install, but imagine if you had a roofing issue that now became an electrical issue that now becomes a leak into your house, and you got charged water. It can be kind of a bit convoluted about when you're combining those two types of systems. I would actually suggest looking more into PV integrated. Just means can be standardized or dual glass panels that then go onto a roof that can then water penetrate. And what that means is you can still go service your electrical system and roofing system quite independently. So shingles may become a thing, and I have actually seen a few installed, and they're working fine. But the question comes, what about the maintenance on those types of systems? Current systems are modular and very serviceable. You can't really get under a shingle very well without lifting a whole bunch of other shingles. Okay. Now you need a roofer and an electrician all in one to service those sites.
Okay. One more question then. For utility guy, I guess. What's the largest solar farm in Alberta right now?
In Alberta, I think it's 15, right? That's the Brook Solar? 16 megawatts.
16 megs?
Yeah.
Okay.
but I'm working for a client that's permitting an 800 megawatt.
800?
Yeah, I know, that'd be the biggest power plant in Alberta if it's built. Can you imagine? Yeah.
That takes up a lot of acreage.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think the biggest in Canada is like 100 right now, something like that, so in Ontario.
Go ahead. Yeah,
So hey guys, so we all know that solar panel is a long-term investment. So how are you gonna expand the market as a salesperson? How you go and convince the commercial and industrial that will be beneficial in the long run? So you kind of get what I'm asking?
I think it was how commercial.
Is that for like rooftop or?
So like for whatever your company offers, so what the one reason you go there and convince them to buy your product?
It's very case by case dependent. We've done the Sun Mine out in BC, which is a dual axis tracking system that's covering the majority of the electrical consumption for a mine, which is electricity prices in BC at least are very different, so the business case was there for them. So that's a very easy conversation. For people that aren't looking for the long-term benefit of PV, I believe there are several policymakers here in the province looking to push forward the PACE program, which it would be instead tying it, instead of the long-term benefit to you, you get to experience the benefit while you have it, and then you're free to move on and pass on the savings towards the next homeowner. So there's several things in the work that make it less tied to long-term investment and more tied to the benefit you will experience throughout your life with the system.
Yeah. Okay, cool, thanks.
Quick question, but that one in Brooks, I should sweep the snow off. I went by there yesterday. But there's a job. Sorry. But is that on the Alberta balancing pool? Can you see it on the website? Can you see all the solar generating ones on the grid? I haven't looked at it for so many years.
Yeah, Brooks is on there for sure. I don't think there's any other ones on there. But yeah, it's on the balancing pool website, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could see when it's covered in snow.
I have one more question. Once we start talking about Tesla company, so everybody knows, I just curious, everybody knows they are advertising wall power, and I just wondering, do you have guys experience or do you deal with this power, or just want to know your opinion?
Are you referencing the Tesla Powerwall?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so we are Tesla certified installers. So we've been installing Powerwalls for the last year and a half throughout. The majority of them are going into BC. It just seems to work better with how they bill their electricity, because the business case for a $15,000 investment for a Powerwall 2 in Calgary, here in the city of Calgary, is very low. The business case is necessarily not there, but the technology itself is amazing, I think, and is improving rapidly. I would definitely see it being far more viable to the general population in a few years, as soon as the prices come down or another product comes onto the market that can directly compete with Tesla, that maybe would force them to bring it down a bit.
Okay, so you definitely think that's the future behind, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely think the Powerwall is a little bit behind where it needs to be at the moment.
Sorry about the long silences.
I just have a question here. What do you believe that are the biggest challenge for the maintenance to ensure reliability and efficiency for this type of plant? Because you are talking about project here, but maintenance and operations to be efficient and reliability for the customers. So what are the biggest challenge for this team?
For maintenance?
Yes. Biggest challenge for maintenance and efficiency of this plant.
I think there's a few different things, and I think we can pick up what the other guy drops here. But the maintenance can be something as simple as cleaning your panels, keeping snow off them. In many ways, we'll probably not recommend you get up on your roof and actually clear your snow. Generally, it's a safety hazard. But if it's a ground mount or something easily accessible, you will see performance increases, especially this time of year. The days are getting longer. We're right around the corner from the equinox, and you do see an increase in power when they're clear, especially this time of year. Another one that I can think of right off the bat is that's becoming a maybe a global phenomenon, but I've seen it all across Canada, is the issues with rodents and pigeons getting under the arrays, nibbling on wires, nesting in there, and our company definitely stocks a variety of different products that you can pretty much enclose the array, so things can't just get under there. Not only that, there's products that actually make your system look a little nicer and cleaner. To be honest, one of them, the brand would be called Soulsearching. If you're interested in looking at that, it just kind of encapsulates the array. And lastly, like I said, is kind of inverter placement and making sure you put that in a great spot. I notice a lot of people here in Alberta like to put them indoors, which is a fantastic idea. You want to keep the dust and sort of debris and bugs sort of off there, so that as it needs to release its heat, it can, so you're not losing some efficiency and B, lessening the life of the inverter. But maybe you guys have some ideas on some other maintenance. It's a fairly low maintenance product and system in general.
Yeah, you touched on that very well about the snow and how it's not recommended to, especially in the winter, get up on your roof and clear those out. But we actually do have local data through Edmonton and Grand Prairie, where they had identical panels at all of the tilt angles you could imagine, really, and they cleaned them off one set and left them completely covered in snow on the other side. So you were only seeing about a 5% production drop throughout the year with snow on your modules, which is quite significant because these systems do produce heat. The majority of the snow is actually going to be coming off the panels. So a bigger problem, at least for most residential customers, would be keeping the snow on the roof so that it's not coming off in a large amount, which is quite dangerous. So having a product which all companies should be installing to slowly allow the snow to come off safely is more of a maintenance thing than, I'd say, having the snow on the modules and losing some power, because then you have safety involved.
Keep in mind, winter gives you the least amount of sun hours, so why would you risk your health and safety for that on the annual yield that you get there? So you can see some big number increases, but compared to a summer month, it's so tiny, it doesn't really matter that much. And typically with the companies all up here, we would design a little bit of oversizing maybe to offset those types of losses that you may see. But like you said, it's about 5%.
I'd just add, I think the conclusion of the research based on the test sites in Edmonton and Red Deer, and I think maybe they had a couple of others, where they did the comparison and they looked at the financial impact. What would it cost to hire someone to go up on the roof and clear the snow when there's snow on the panels, and basically it wouldn't pay for that extra labor. It's really a relatively trivial amount. Although I am one of those people that would buy the long pole rake and pull things down. Any other questions for our panel?
Have you ever implemented in your project concentrated power system because they have higher efficiency than photovoltaic panels?
No, I haven't. But I have seen one down in Nevada on the utility scale. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but it's concentrating onto the central pillar, and then I think it's a Stirling cycle that it runs off of, right? Yeah. And it was this giant orb of blinding light at the top of this thing. It was very fascinating to see. So if you're ever down in Las Vegas, it's worth to drive out there and see it. But no, I never have you guys. Yeah. I'm not sure why in Alberta nobody's really doing it, but I think just because PV technology is now so much more mass produced and efficient and cheap, cheaper, that I don't think it makes sense to do the concentrating. But there are projects that I've seen. So yeah.
I think those concentration systems too, I mean, they're great because they're dispatchable, or some of them are. They're the ones that melt salt. You can get the power when you want it, so it sort of combines storage with generation. But I think with snow, the reflectors, you have such a large field of reflectors that snow can be a pretty big issue in those systems as opposed to the PV too. Any other questions? It's your last chance, or the gavel's going to go down. Okay. Well, I can't thank you guys enough. Let's give these guys another round of applause, please. Come.
No, seriously.
This is extremely informative. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to be with us and field such a wider range of questions than I had